Is there anyone who's here for the first time? Welcome. Did your arm go up?
That's fine.
Oh, you were just pointing. Okay. Thank you. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Teach me the mystery of my existence. In the fire of devotion, burn my ignorance. In the stillness of my soul, come, Spirit, come. I'm sorry I messed it up before, but I wanted to say it the way it needs to be said. That is also from Whispers from Eternity. And I've kind of kept a copy of this up on my cupboard door all these years from when I first read that. It just really spoke to me, so I like to share it. So before I get too serious about what I want to say today, as disciples of Paramahansa Yogananda, we all know that his training is very subtle for the most part. And we've learned to listen for that and work with it. But we also know that every once in a while, we just kind of get smacked. And that training, that guidance is immediate, it's blatant, and we accept that too. In recent months, some members of my family have been having some serious issues, and those issues have given urgency to my thoughts on today's subject, the secret of right action. However, I felt I was too close to the subject to really talk about it today, and so I had asked Jayanti to help me. And she agreed, but guess what? She's not here today. She's very sick with the flu. And she's weak, she can hardly speak, and she felt she might still be contagious, so she decided very wisely to stay home. And thank you, Chaitanya, he stepped in at the last minute. Really appreciate it. So I had to admit that Master was telling me to pull myself together and face the subject head on. Our training as disciples does not spare us from having to deal with tough issues. I've been seriously impacted by what has happened in my family, and I won't go into it, but I know I have to work through it. And when I first got into these teachings, I was enthralled with their breadth and their depth. I was learning about the ancient caste system and decided that we must all be Brahmins, if we're into these high teachings. And the very day I had that lofty idea, I happened to open up Master's writings, and very clearly he says, "In this age, my disciples are Kshatriyas." The work of the Kshatriya is to live by spiritual principles. And this is important work in the early Dwapara Yuga in which we live. I guess the Brahmin incarnation is going to have to wait a while. It's hard to watch our loved ones making decisions while in a state of shock and fear, and because those decisions are not ours to make, all we can do is offer support. This recent experience has shown me how clearly, how difficult it is for individuals who do not have a spiritual core to know what to do when disaster strikes. When we're off balance, we often make decisions that seem expedient in the moment, but have far-ranging long-term consequences. Why? Because those decisions are not in alignment with the spiritual laws at work in this creation. What are those laws? The principles of energy and magnetism, karma and reincarnation, the yamas and niyamas of the Eightfold Path, our path of Raja Yoga. This is a quote from Master. "Sorrow, illness, and failure are the natural results of transgressions against God's laws. Wisdom consists in avoiding such violations and finding peace and happiness within yourself through thoughts and actions that are in harmony with your higher self. Seek wisdom without measure from God's all-possessing, all-bountiful hands." So study our wonderful teachings. They come from a very high age, known as the Vedic period of ancient India. Those of us familiar with the Vedas would say that they come from the Satya Yuga, the Golden Age. Paramahansa Yogananda came to America and so beautifully shared these teachings in ways that our Western minds and hearts could comfortably receive. Let us learn these teachings, live these teachings, so that in times of pain and chaos and confusion, we already have a sense of what is the right thing to do in those circumstances, or what is the dharmic thing to do. Dharma means right action. However, right action in our understanding is not a static concept, it's very dynamic. Dharma depends on what action might be right under the immediate circumstances. And there's an example that I like to use in my classes sometimes. If you think of a man sitting down, staying home a lot, sitting on the couch, and pretty much not doing much, and then, for whatever reason, one day he says, guess what? I'm going to get off this couch and I'm going to go out and get a job. Wonderful. Now, if Mahatma Gandhi, who we all know is a great humanist and spiritual leader, was sitting on his meditation seat and woke up one day and decided, I think I'm going to give all that up. I'm just going to go get a job, make some money. You see, the action is the same thing. Someone's getting up to moving their energy to get a job. But for one, it would be a dharmic thing to do, something that would be a right action for him. And for the other one, maybe not so much. So dharma is something we have to really just stay tuned into in a very immediate and present sense. And I had an uncle many, many years ago. He was in the service, armed forces, and so we didn't see him very often. And but all I really knew about him was that, got some beeps? All I really knew about him was that people used to say, oh, he's frank. He's frank. And I was young and I was trying to understand, what it took to always speak truth. And so when he came to visit, I really watched him like a hawk. And I found that when he spoke, he often left people feeling not so good about themselves, And that I noticed that, and I began to think there was a difference between being frank, maybe stating the obvious, when that may not be the truth of the situation, or there may be a different way to say it. And many years later, I remembered this too, because it was such a counter example. A friend of mine from Ananda was talking to someone who had been making some pretty poor decisions there for a while. And when he spoke to her, he didn't speak to the facts of it. Instead, he spoke to the truth of her real nature, her higher nature. And I thought, there we see truth in action as well. And how much more kind and supportive and productive that approach was. So Gandhi used the term satyagraha. You've all probably heard it. And he coined the word, and he said it meant holding to truth. And not too long ago, I was having a conversation with someone I know who comes from a Christian fundamentalist background. And it's usually hard to have that kind of conversation with someone from our background because there's not a lot of common understanding. But my friend said he was calling because he was worried that I wasn't saved and that, according to his path, I was going to go to hell. And but he said, but I know you. He said, I don't really think, that's what's going to happen, but help me to understand the difference. Why there, I thought there's only one truth. How can there be more than one truth? And I really thought about it before I answered him. And I said, well, the first thing is your use of the word saved. I said, you may not realize it, but that's a term that's very common to your path. It's not a term that's even common among other Christian denominations. I come from a Roman Catholic background. It's not a term that we use. I said it's very specific to your path, and also the interpretation of what that means is very specific to your path. And so I said, many of us, anybody who loves God, is going to achieve their salvation, whether they're saved or not, in your eyes. See, so there's all these different ways of saying, putting truth, and saying, what does that look like? How do we look at it, and how do we make it relevant in the moment to our circumstances? So I said to my friend, let's define the concept of truth first of all. And I quoted Master's beautiful definition. I just love it. He says, truth is no theory, no speculative system of philosophy, no intellectual insight. Truth is exact correspondence with reality. For man, truth is unshakable knowledge of his real nature, his self as soul. I love that, how broad that definition is, and how relevant it can be in so many ways that we look at it, whether we're following this particular path or not. And my friend thought the same thing. He said, well, I see your viewpoint, and I see that this definition does give us some common ground. He said, but I'm still nervous because this is outside the neat interpretation of what my pastor taught me. But in the moment, there was some good communication. Whatever our understanding of truth, if our understanding is based on spiritual principles, we'll be guided to dharmic actions. We are more likely to make decisions that will help us to stay in integrity with the way the creation works. In this way, we can avoid the many distractions and chaos that follows adharmic actions. And adharmic meaning the opposite of dharmic. Adharmic is actions that are outside of integrity with these spiritual laws. So, seeking truth, known as satya, and then basing our actions on truth, dharma, helps us to navigate through the challenges of our lives. There is another concept that helps us to get through the rough times and helps us to help others get through the rough times. And that concept is love, prema. I really tuned into this concept when I received my name. I learned my name Bhavani. Of course, most of you know that. I realized that there were degrees to understanding any divine quality, love being one of those 8 divine qualities that God manifests within creation. Should I go over them? Love and joy, peace and calm, strength and wisdom, light and sound. And so many of us, we say prayers and we meditate and we hope to feel God's presence. And sometimes it comes to us in a sense of peace, sometimes a sense of a bubbling joy, sometimes in growing wisdom over the years. These are the different ways that God's presence is made known to us. We don't all, see the vision, hear the lights and the thunder, and see the lights and hear the thunder. Again, our path is very subtle, much more subtle than that. God expresses to us and through us in these 8 wonderful ways. So, love. The term bhakti refers to love that is unconditional. Well, I will love you if you love me back, or if you meet my expectations. And if you don't, I'll withdraw my love. And I'd never thought of the differences in the ways that particular quality evolves for us. We all go through that stage, but hopefully we move through it. Bhava, from which my name comes, refers to unconditional love. There is love flowing through me to you, whether it's returned or not. My love is not dependent on you loving me back. Ever since I received my name, I kind of thought that was probably what I should make as the theme for my life, trying to perfect that particular quality of unconditional love. The term prema means divine love. To learn to love as God loves, not only unconditionally, but also impersonally, so that our love is not based on personality, but on the deep inner communion that can exist between individual aspects of the same divine presence. That's who we all are, individual aspects of the same divine presence. When we're centered in prema, there is no judgment. There's only love, acceptance, and inclusion. So we're all in this life together. Let's help each other to reach our highest potential and to support each other as we realize that none of us are perfect. Sri Yukteswar's famous quote, "If you were perfect, you'd be adorning some other abode." And he was acknowledging that life on planet Earth is challenging. I'd like to close with one of my favorite quotes from Master. "Mankind is engaged in an eternal quest for that something else he hopes will bring happiness, complete and unending. For those individual souls who have sought and found God, the search is over. He is that something else." God bless you. We'll have our offering.